All right. So let's take a look at Adams and see why his election and his presidency is troubling in some ways. Now, again, you're talking about the election of 1796, and there aren't that many people around that are as qualified as Adams to be president. He served as Washington's vice president for 8 years. Okay, he has been a diplomat. He was active during the Revolution. So Adams has tons of experience. Okay, it doesn't mean that he is necessarily the favored candidate. Okay, one of the things that has developed is these political parties, and Adams, Washington, Hamilton, many of the founders, many of the writers of the Constitution, those guys are Federalists. Okay, they had supported the writing of the Constitution, they had supported the ratification of the Constitution, and that party name has bled over now into the political arena. Federalists all are organizing themselves around Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton is the party boss in many ways. Hamilton and the Federalists, they all share certain characteristics. And I've told you this before, but you're going to need to know these things because they're going to show up. Okay? The Federalists believe in strong central government. They believe in a stronger central government in weaker states. They were fans of strengthening the central government under the Constitution. They are pro-British in their foreign policy. In their foreign policy outlook, they tend to favor the British. They are fans of big business. They are fans of trade and commerce and big business. They tend to be more urban than rural. And they tend to favor the elites, whether it be the landed elite or the wealthy elite. They tend to favor the elites. Hamilton is, like I said, running the show. And Adams is the logical candidate. But Hamilton is not necessarily sold on Adams because he doesn't think that, as really the party leader, that he can control Adams. We today don't really understand how powerful party leaders were in the early days. Okay, I mean, you're talking about all the way up really into the 1800s, that leaders of political parties could be extremely powerful. They ran the show, and some would argue in some cases even ran the puppet show that was the president. So if Hamilton wants to maintain control over his party, he needs someone that he can boss around, and Adams is not him. Okay, so Hamilton may have even considered running himself, except there was questions about his eligibility. The Constitution states that you must be a natural-born citizen to be a candidate for president, and Hamilton is not. Hamilton was born in West Indies. So there were questions about that. So Hamilton instead is going to throw some of his support really behind this guy, Thomas Pinckney, who is the governor of South Carolina. And really, this is the guy that Hamilton would like to see elected because he felt like he could control him. Okay? So that means technically, because of the way that the elections ran in 1796 under this old system that doesn't exist anymore, okay, the parties could nominate actually several different people. Today, you guys know that the party's only going to nominate one person, right? But that wasn't the case in 1796. So essentially, the Federalists have Pinckney running and Adams running. Hamilton would prefer that Pinckney won, but Adams is a strong contender, namely because of his experience. The other political party, this should not shock any of you, okay, centers around Jefferson. And the Democratic Republicans, as sometimes they're called, or the Jeffersonian Republicans, okay, they are going to coalesce around Jefferson. They are a holdover in some ways from the old anti-federalists that worked against the ratification of the Constitution. Jefferson, though, and Jefferson's party tends to be more rural, more farmer, more common man-based than the Federalists. Jefferson is a big fan of the French, and the Jeffersonian Republicans are always going to be pro-French in their foreign policy. The French had helped us during our Revolution, and so they are pro-French in their outlook. They are not fans of big business. Instead, Jefferson believes that the strongest America would be an agricultural America. Okay, not a business America, not a manufacturing America, but a farming America. And these guys aren't big fans of strengthening the central government. Okay? They would prefer that most of the power remain in the hands of the states as it had during the Articles of Confederation. So, Jefferson is their man, and they're going to run Jefferson as their candidate for president in 1796. Remember, this is our first contested election. 1796 is really the first sort of open election we've had. Well, wait a minute, we elected Washington to 2 terms, right? Well, yeah, anybody was going to vote for Washington, okay? If Washington ran, he was going to get elected. If he had run for a 3rd term here, he would get elected, okay? So this is really our first contested election. And when the vote is held, something really strange happens, okay? Remember that the Federalists really have 2 candidates out there. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because the Constitution, as it was written and approved and went into effect in 1789, okay, as it kind of goes into effect and the government gets formed, you got to understand that the way that the Constitution dealt with elections is that all these potential candidates are out there, okay? We can't count Hamilton because he doesn't run, but Jefferson, Pinckney, and Adams are all out there, right? And so whoever wins, whoever gets the most electoral votes is going to be president. And whoever finishes second is going to be vice president. But like I told you guys, the founders never really took into account this concept of party politics, okay? And so when the election is held and when the results are tabulated, this is what happens. Adams got 71 electoral votes. He finishes first and is named president. But Thomas Jefferson got 68 electoral votes. And since he finished second, who becomes vice president? Thomas Jefferson. Pinckney finishes third and he gets nothing. Okay? So Adams is president, Jefferson is vice president. Why is that a big deal? Why is that kind of wonky? You have a president from one political party and a vice president from another. Can you imagine that happening today? That would be a disaster, right? It would be very entertaining, but it would be a disaster. Okay? And potentially this is what could happen. Now, Adams tries to sort of be a mediator here, okay? And to kind of help he actually does sort of pull some Jefferson supporters, like Madison, into the cabinet, and they're never really welcomed and never really sort of dealt with. The Federalists are going to dominate everything. Okay? Now, Adams doesn't really trust Hamilton and doesn't really trust Pinckney because Hamilton is going to try to dominate him. And the party is going to try to dominate him. But Adams is going to kind of chart his own course. Okay? Adams is a strong enough individual and savvy enough to where he is going to chart his own course. And that's going to cost him, okay, in many ways. Because he's going to lose the support of sometimes his own political party. All right. We also don't take into account sometimes the hornet's nest that Adams walks into. Okay? In some ways, Washington had kicked the can down the road and had tried to avoid conflict. Okay? When the French Revolution broke out in 1789, Washington said, we're going to be what? Neutral. Okay? We're not going to get involved. But the other nations of Europe do. And by 1792, 1793, okay, most of Europe is at war with France over the French Revolution. Okay? As you got to about 1793 or so, the revolution in France turns very bloody and very violent. Okay? This is the time of the Reign of Terror, mass executions in France for those who didn't support the Republic. Okay? The guillotine, Robespierre, all of those guys are trying to create a very revolutionary republic. But also, they're fighting a war, okay? They're fighting a war for their freedom against the rest of Europe. Now, war has not gone very well for a while. But as you got to the period of the Reign of Terror, the war actually starts to pivot towards the French, and the French actually do pretty well. So, when Adams becomes president, most of Europe is at war. And whether we like it or not, we're kind of stuck in the middle of it. Because two of the major powers that are at war with one another are Great Britain and France. Okay? So the British and the French are fighting one another. What do we try to do? We try to trade with both of them, right? We need to trade with both of them. Because we need that revenue. Sometimes our statements about neutrality are ones that we believe that it's almost like when we declare ourselves to be neutral, this cloak of invisibility comes down over us and nobody can see us and we can do whatever the heck we want to, okay? That's not how neutrality works, okay? But we say we're neutral, so we ought to be able to trade with both sides, and we try to. Okay? Which only makes both sides mad at us. Okay? Because if we're trading with the French, the British are going to be mad at us. If we're trading with the British, the French are going to be mad at us. Okay? And so, to express that anger, a lot of times what they did, whether it be the British or the French, is if they caught an American ship out somewhere, especially in the Caribbean or other places trying to trade, they would seize it. They would seize the cargoes. They would steal our stuff. Okay? Well, why don't we declare war on them? With what? We don't have an army much, and we certainly don't have a navy. Okay? So, we just kind of have to take it. It makes us really angry. But what are we going to do? Okay? So really, Adams walks into this hornet's nest of this flurry, really, of activity, of warfare, and we're stuck in the middle of it. As more of our ships get seized, as more of our cargoes and more of our ships get seized, Adams's party wants him to do what? Start a war. Okay? And of course, since they are Federalists, they want us to start a war against who? France. Okay? Because they're pro-British in their foreign policy. And the French are stealing our stuff. Okay? But so are the British. And so, of course, what Jefferson's going to say is what? Hey, they're doing it too. We can't declare war on both of them. So, it is a real pickle, okay? That proverbial rock and hard place situation. Adams is pressured on all sides to do something, okay? And he will, okay? Early in his presidency, because of all of these European conflicts, okay, left over from the French Revolution, and because all of these European powers, especially the British and the French, were seizing our vessels, okay, Adams decides to, instead of declaring war, okay, which is what his party wanted him to do, Adams decides to send 3 commissioners to France to try to negotiate a settlement to keep the French from seizing our stuff. Okay? So, Adams takes a diplomatic line here. Okay? I gotta hand it to him. This is he resists his party's constant drumbeats of war and says, look, okay, we're not gonna do that. I'm going to send these guys over here, and we're going to see if we can negotiate a new treaty, and they can stop seizing our stuff. Okay? Yes?
Is that the Frankfurt Treaty?
Is that what?
The Frankfurt Treaty?
Not yet, because they're not going to get a treaty yet. All right. Here we go. Adams picks 3 guys. Okay? John Marshall, who is a dedicated Federalist, okay, who is pretty soon going to be named to the Supreme Court and become one of the most influential Chief Justices of the Supreme Court, and probably the most influential Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in our nation's history. Okay, so Marshall is a committed Federalist, okay, and he is going to be sent. All right, Charles Pinckney. Charles Cotesworth Pinckney will be sent. Okay, he's also a committed Federalist. Adams also picks Elbridge Gerry. Now, Elbridge Gerry was kind of this nonpartisan guy. Adams considered him to be, what does he say? The second most important free thinker in America, something like that. Who was the first? Adams. Okay, so Adams really likes him. Okay, kind of considers him to be this independent thinker, and he thinks he'd be a great addition. His Federalist-dominated cabinet hates him. Okay, and they're like, "No, you're not sending Gerry." Okay, Adams goes before Congress and tells Congress, "Look, I'm going to send these guys over here. We're not going to go to war. I'm going to send these guys over here. And the guys that I'm going to send are Marshall, Pinckney, and Gerry." Kind of this thumb at his nose and at his own cabinet, and he sends Gerry anyway. Okay. Now these guys are supposed to go and get to France and go and present their credentials, and they're supposed to meet with the French foreign minister. Okay, they're supposed to meet with this guy, the Marquis de Talleyrand. Okay. Charles Maurice de Talleyrand, okay? He is the foreign minister, the French foreign minister, okay? So this is who they're supposed to go and talk to, nobody else, okay? So Marshall, Pinckney, and Gerry all head over to France, okay? So let's kind of follow along here, okay? Here we are, okay? So we send over, okay? Marshall, Pinckney, Gerry. And we are supposed to negotiate with him, right? All right. So Marshall and these guys, when they get there, they're supposed to present their credentials to Talleyrand, and that's all they're supposed to do. And then they're supposed to negotiate, okay? All right. When they get there, instead of being able to see Talleyrand, okay, Talleyrand sends out 3 negotiators, if you want to kind of think of it that way, okay? In the report back to Congress about this incident, those 3 are never named, okay? They're referred to only as Mr. X, Mr. Y, and Mr. Z, okay? So here's Marshall and Pinckney and Jerry, and instead of being able to meet with Talleyrand like they're supposed to, they get to meet at Mr. X, Mr. Y, and Mr. Z. X, Y, and Z inform the American commissioners that the only way that they're going to see Talleyrand is to do this, okay? Number 1, you have to agree to loan France, figure kind of thrown out was somewhere around $10 million. So France wants a loan from the United States. So, what?
Just to talk.
Just to talk. Okay? So, we want a loan. Now, you got to understand that France is at war. Okay? They need the money. When we had the revolution here, who had loaned us money? The French had. Okay? So, them asking us for a loan shouldn't really surprise you. But X, Y, and Z also demand that the United States pay each of them a bribe, okay? Tens of thousands of dollars in bribes for each, for X, Y, and Z. So essentially, okay, what they ask is for a loan to go to France, okay, and a bribe to go to X, Y, and Z. And if they paid the bribe and arranged for the loan, then they would get to see Talleyrand. Excuse me. They were also told that they could not leave. That if they left, it would mean it would be viewed as an act of war. Okay? Well, Marshall says we can't do that. Okay? And they leave poor Jerry there. Okay? That's what he gets for being so independent-minded. So Marshall and Penny leave Jerry there, right? Get on board a ship and hightail it back to America, okay, to report what's happened. So Marshall goes before Congress, and the report is goes before Congress, goes before the president, and becomes known as the XYZ affair, okay? The reaction here in America is very bitter. Now look, we were already on the verge of war with several powers, okay, the British, but especially the French. Adams is embarrassed because what happened? I sent these guys over here to negotiate, and what? Okay, the French don't respect us. They don't respect my ambassadors. They don't, meet with the person they're supposed to meet with. They're asked for a loan and a bribe. Okay? And so the reaction is pretty swift, and the reaction is pretty furious. Okay? The Federalists in Congress, when they hear about the XYZ affair, they hear about the report, they want to declare war immediately, okay? the kind of rallying cry became millions for defense. We will spend millions here in defense if we have to, but we will not pay 1 cent in tribute, bribes. Okay? Millions for defense, not 1 cent for tribute. Adams basically tells the French they can stuff it, and American ships and French ships begin to attack one another, and we are on the verge of a war. And in fact, for 2 years, from 1798 until 1800, okay, you have an undeclared naval war going on between the United States and France. It's called the Quasi-War sometimes, okay, or the undeclared naval war. Okay. Now, the French are attacking our ships, stealing our stuff. Okay. France wants some of the same privileges that the British had, but more importantly, the French are pretty angry at us, and they probably deserve to be angry at us. We had promised after the Revolution that we would not enter into treaties without French approval, that we would not do certain things without consulting the French first. Okay, they had loaned us millions of dollars. They had sent troops. They had sent their navy over here to help us win our revolution. And we had essentially thumbed our nose at them after the war. Okay, we signed a treaty with England without consulting them. Signed a treaty with Spain without consulting them. Okay? And so they are pretty bitter. They're pretty chafed about what's happened. And they probably deserve to be. This really hurts Jefferson. Okay? Jefferson's pro-French. Jefferson's been saying, hey, it's not the French, it's the British. And now all of a sudden Jefferson looks like a fool, right? Okay? And this really hurts Jefferson. The Federalists see this as an opportunity to not only manipulate themselves maybe into a war, okay, which is kind of what we had seen going on, okay. We're already in an undeclared war, so what's the next step? But they also, the Federalists began to see this as an opportunity to really hammer Jefferson's political party, to make them look like a bunch of wahoos, okay? And so that's what you're going to see. Now, some of this is look, anytime the nation declares war on a foreign power, we try to vilify the foreign power, okay? We do all sorts of bad things, okay? And we make them look animalistic sometimes. We make them look stupid. And the way we do our caricatures, the way we even refer to them, okay? And so part of it is that, okay? When we kind of get angry at the French, you're going to see a natural reaction to anything French. It's going to be anti-French, okay? But a lot of this is pushed by the Federalist Party that sees this as an opportunity to weaken Jefferson and to weaken his political party. And so some of it is just downright dirty politics, okay? So after the XYZ affair, with things running hot, okay? For example, look at this list of things that we do after the XYZ affair. We end the French alliance, excuse me, okay? We create the Naval Department. Adams is responsible for creating the Department of the Navy and assigning our first real Secretary of the Navy. And then Congress will appropriate the money to triple the size of the Army and build 40 warships. Remember what they said? Millions for defense, not 1 cent for tribute. Well, here they said, look, sign us up. We'll pay the taxes. We're going to build an Army. We're going to build a Navy. Okay? They dragged poor Washington out of retirement and put him in charge of the new Army in case the the French decide to invade us, okay? So poor Washington has to, get up out of bed and go back to being a soldier again, okay? And we start attacking French shipping. If we're not attacking it with our warships that are being built, we're attacking it with our merchant ships, and we're basically pirating, okay, against the French. So things are running hot, okay? And there's this wave of anti-French animosity here in America, okay? There are some real bitter feelings, okay? And so the reaction comes out of Congress, okay? Congress is going to pass two sets of laws, okay? The Alien and Sedition Acts, okay? There's one big group that are called the Alien Acts, and then there's another big group that are called the Sedition Acts, okay? So they're two separate things, but we sort of run them together. The Alien and Sedition Acts, okay, are really a direct attack on Jefferson and his political party. I told you guys that Jefferson's party tended to be pro-French. There were a lot of people that were coming here from America, or coming here from France, coming to America from France that were refugees. They were trying to escape the war. Okay? And so when they got here to America, and then after 6 or 7 years became citizens, who are they going to ally themselves with politically? The guy that was pro-French in his foreign policy, namely what? Jefferson. Okay? And so the Federalists look at this wave of French refugees, and all they see is votes for Jefferson. Okay? And they're like, we can't let this happen. The Federalists see, in some ways, the Federalists see they see the writing on the wall. Okay? They are a party whose days are numbered if they don't do something. Okay? And so the Alien Sedition Acts are really this lashing out against Jefferson and Jefferson's political party. Okay? And it is going to change things. Okay? The Alien Sedition Acts, they're going to introduce a concept that we need to work out in American jurisprudence. Okay? What do you do if Congress passes a law that you clearly think violates the Constitution? Okay? What can the states do if Congress passes a law that they feel violates the Constitution? Okay? Well, they can take it to court. Okay? And of course, it can go all the way to the nation's top court, the Supreme Court. Okay? Congress is hostile to Jefferson. And so Jefferson's not a big fan of the courts either. And so when they react to this, you're going to see something get introduced that we're going to have to deal with until we get to the end of this course. Okay, what can states do if the Congress passes a law that they feel violates their rights as states? Okay. Jefferson and Madison are going to choose one avenue. Okay. The other avenue later on, during Jefferson's presidency, is going to be the judicial one. And that one is going to become the most important. Okay. All right, we'll stop here. Okay. For the lecture on Friday, we're going to talk about the Alien Sedition Acts, the reactions to that. We'll get Adams out and probably put Jefferson in. Okay. So be looking for that. All right, see you guys.